The quiet, early morning streets of Albuquerque were still wrapped in darkness when, at around 4:40 a.m. on May 29th, 2024, a disturbing 911 call came in. A woman on her way to work reported spotting a mangled bicycle lying across the roadway and a person collapsed nearby. At first, she thought it was a woman, curled on her side, motionless. She was too frightened to walk over and check, but she could tell something terrible had happened. Responding officers arrived within minutes and discovered the injured person was not a woman, but an older man, bleeding heavily and completely unresponsive. His bicycle, equipped with multiple working lights, was twisted into pieces, its metal frame bent like paper. Officers noticed the impact must have been extremely violent. Parts of the helmet were scattered far from the victim's body, suggesting he had been thrown several feet on impact. While first responders attempted to stabilize him, officers began examining the area. They found shoes, personal items, and bits of helmet debris spread across the road, implying the collision happened at high speed. Some officers theorized he had been hit from behind. Others suggested a side impact. Either way, the violence of the crash was unmistakable. When they searched the victim's belongings, they found a work badge identifying him as 63-year-old Scott Habermel, a respected physicist heading to his job before sunrise. He was rushed to the nearest trauma center, but his injuries were catastrophic. Searching the neighborhood for answers, officers noticed a camera pointing directly at the intersection, possibly the best chance at identifying the vehicle. But no one answered the door, and the camera wasn't immediately accessible. It felt like a dead end. Then, hours later, a new call came in. A staff member from a nearby church had recovered grainy surveillance footage from their building. The video captured Scott's bike lights blinking through the trees, seconds before a fast-moving vehicle barreled toward him. Even though the vehicle's details were unclear, the sound of the collision echoed unmistakably across the recording. Later that morning, officers located an abandoned silver Hyundai sedan reported stolen less than a mile from the crash site. Its window was shattered, the ignition torn apart, and the vehicle's damage appeared consistent with slamming into a cyclist. Despite these discoveries, there were no suspects, no witnesses, and no clear footage. When Scott passed away from severe blunt force trauma, including multiple skull and facial fractures, investigators could only rule the tragedy an accident. With no leads, the case eventually went cold and was officially closed in September 2024, pending new information. But 9 months later, a tip would emerge that would blow the case wide open, revealing something far more shocking than investigators ever imagined. The case sat dormant for almost a year until February 2025, when investigators received an anonymous message that instantly reignited everything. The tipster claimed there was a video of the crash circulating online. Not captured by security cameras, not recorded by a witness passing by, but filmed from inside the very car that killed Scott Habermel. Detectives traced the footage to an Instagram account belonging to an 11-year-old boy named Messiah. What they found on his profile stunned even the most seasoned investigators. His page wasn't a typical child social media feed. It was a disturbing collection of videos showcasing crimes, petty thefts, vandalism, pranks on fast food workers, even a clip of someone ripping a Ring doorbell off a home. But these clips weren't nothing compared to the video linked to Scott's death. In the crash recording, Messiah sat in the front passenger seat, casually waving a handgun while laughing. The camera panned around, showing two other boys inside the stolen Hyundai, 15-year-old William Will Garcia and 13-year-old Jonathan Overbay. Their voices filled the car with reckless excitement and chilling comments as they talked about bumping a cyclist up ahead. The tone wasn't panicked or accidental, it was gleeful. For investigators, the revelation felt surreal. They had suspected joyriding teens or a careless driver, but not children barely in their teens, one of them still in elementary school. Once the horrifying video was confirmed as real, officers visited Scott's widow, Janie, who had spent months believing the crash was a tragic accident. When investigators told her the truth, that her husband was intentionally struck, she broke down. She struggled with the idea of attaching actual faces to the people responsible. It was cold, ruthless, senseless, one detective told her, but we are going to get answers. Over the course of 3 intense days, March 17th through March 19th, police tracked down all 3 boys shown in the video. They began with Messiah, locating him at his Uncle Michael's home. When officers entered the house for a safety check, the uncle immediately became defensive, arguing about their presence. But the officers had probable cause to be there, and Messiah was taken in for questioning. His room contained indicators of troubling behavior, conversations about stolen guns, messages bragging about previous crimes, and plans to rob gun stores. At the police station, detectives treated Messiah gently because of his age, giving him snacks and reading him his rights carefully. The child initially agreed to talk, but then reversed course after calling his uncle, insisting he wanted to wait for a lawyer. Even without his statement, investigators now had one thing they never imagined this case would produce: a filmed confession of the crime, recorded by the perpetrators themselves. And the hunt for the others was just beginning. After securing Messiah, investigators moved on to the second teen captured in the crash footage, 15-year-old William "Will" Garcia. Unlike Messiah, Will didn't hide or run. He voluntarily agreed to meet officers at a public location. But the situation escalated when police arrived and found Will standing beside his best friend, 15-year-old Eli King. Eli quickly inserted himself into the interaction, insisting he wasn't involved. He claimed he wasn't anywhere near the car the night of the crash. But detectives had already begun piecing together the online footprints of both boys, and Eli's name appeared repeatedly in chats, videos, and photos tied to the same group involved in the crime spree. Once Will was transported to the station, officers reviewed his Instagram records, discovering content almost identical in nature to Messiah's. Underage teens flashing weapons, videos referencing gang culture, and posts glamorizing violence. Many clips showed Will and Eli together, often handling firearms. Even so, when detectives spoke first with Eli, who remained outside of custody, he painted a very different picture. According to him, Will had told him the incident wasn't planned. Eli claimed that Johnny, the 13-year-old suspected driver, suddenly escalated things and struck the cyclist without warning. Eli insisted Will was merely stuck in the back seat, scared, while the others pressured him to film. Eli seemed nervous, but firm. Detectives noted he was withholding something. They just didn't know what. That truth would come out later. At the station, Will's parents arrived, visibly distressed. His father thanked officers for their work, but immediately instructed Will not to speak to detectives until an attorney was present. It was a calm interaction, nothing like the chaotic confrontation earlier with Messiah's uncle. During his formal interview, detectives read Will his Miranda rights. He quietly listened, nodded, and then said the words investigators expected: "I'd like a lawyer." Even without a confession, Will remained under arrest. Officers allowed him a brief, emotional phone call with his parents before escorting him to the juvenile holding area. His mother reminded him they were right outside and would stand by him. Her father urged him to stay strong. Will, fighting back tears, repeated, "I love you," to both of them. Meanwhile, the final primary suspect, 13-year-old Jonathan Overbay, believed to be the driver, was tracked down at a juvenile probation office during a scheduled appointment with his mother. Johnny was already on probation for a different offense, which meant he was easy to locate. When officers arrived, Johnny looked stunned. He repeatedly asked, "What did I do?" and insisted he had no idea why he was being detained. His mother panicked the moment she heard he was being taken to jail, breaking down as she hugged him tightly. Officers gave her very few details on site. They simply informed her that detectives would explain everything once she arrived at the station. What she would soon see, the crash video, would change her world in seconds. At the station, detectives prepared Johnny's mother for what she was about to see. She had only heard vague details. Someone on a bicycle had been hit, and Messiah was supposedly the driver. She believed Johnny had merely been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when detectives loaded the footage recovered from Messiah's Instagram, her assumptions crumbled. The video began with chaotic laughter inside the stolen Hyundai. Flashing lights, loud voices, and the unmistakable presence of a small handgun filled the frame. Then the camera steadied enough to show the moment the vehicle accelerated toward the cyclist. The sound of the impact echoed through the interrogation room. Johnny's mother jolted back in her chair, hands flying to her face in shock. She couldn't bear to watch the entire clip. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she processed what she had just witnessed, or rather, what she managed to glimpse before looking away. The detective paused the video and gently informed her that they would need Johnny's phone for digital evidence, explaining that tracking data could confirm his location at the moment of the crash. He also told her that they had warrants for DNA and fingerprint comparisons, since biological material had been recovered from the stolen vehicle. She tried to defend her son between sobs, insisting he had been improving after his previous arrest for breaking into a school. But the detective carefully explained that evidence from the scene, combined with the Instagram video, placed Johnny directly inside the car. Moments later, Johnny was brought into the room. He insisted repeatedly that he did nothing and didn't understand why he was being arrested. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering apologies and telling him she didn't know how long he would be gone, but she would stand by him. She reminded him to be calm, to stay out of trouble inside the facility, and to remember how he managed his time during his last detention stay. The officers gave them a brief moment of privacy before escorting Johnny to the holding cells. His mother struggled to remain composed, knowing that this time the situation was far worse than a probation violation. While Johnny was being processed, the investigation took a startling turn. Crime Stoppers received a tip from a schoolteacher. They recognized a voice in the video, the one saying, "Just bump him," urging the driver to hit the cyclist. The voice belonged to 15-year-old Elijah King, Will's best friend. The same Eli who had confidently told detectives he wasn't in the car that night. According to the tipster, Eli had been present in the vehicle during the crash and was not just a witness, he was actively encouraging the assault. Soon after, investigators uncovered additional information suggesting that Will's own family may have known Eli was involved, but chose to remain silent in hopes of securing leniency for Will. With this new revelation, the case expanded dramatically. What started as a suspected hit-and-run had now evolved into a coordinated act involving 4 teens, one of them only 11 years old, captured committing the crime on camera. And the full legal consequences were still unfolding. Once detectives identified Eli King as the 4th voice in the recording, the one urging the driver to bump the cyclist, the investigation shifted rapidly. Eli had confidently denied being in the vehicle, but the audio evidence and the teacher's recognition of his voice were enough to move forward. On June 11, 2025, a grand jury formally indicted 15-year-old Elijah Eli King on multiple charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. He pleaded not guilty and was ordered to remain in custody without bond while awaiting trial. At the same time, officers finalized the cases against the three boys originally identified in the footage. 13-year-old Jonathan Johnny Overbay, believed to be the driver, was transferred to a juvenile detention center. He faced a long list of charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, leaving the scene of an accident causing death, unlawful possession of a handgun by a minor. Months later, according to updates from the Bernalillo County District Attorney, Johnny ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. As a juvenile under New Mexico law, he received the maximum possible sentence and will remain incarcerated until he turns 21. 15-year-old William Garcia faced a harsher legal trajectory. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder and conspiracy, and his case was moved out of juvenile court entirely. Will is now expected to be tried as an adult, which carries the potential for significantly longer sentencing. But the most shocking twist involved the youngest participant. The 11-year-old Messiah, whose Instagram account had exposed the crime to the world, was held in the custody of the Children, Youth, and Families Department after spending the night sleeping on a cot in the police interrogation room due to a lack of placement options. Several days later, the DA's office announced that a 12-year-old had been formally charged with an open count of murder related to Scott Habermel's death. Officials could not reveal the name due to age restrictions, but investigators confirmed privately that the individual was the same child whose video had been found online. This development marked one of the youngest murder charges in New Mexico's recent history. As prosecutors assembled evidence, digital records, DNA samples, fingerprints from the stolen car, and the Instagram video itself, it became clear that the key piece of the puzzle was the footage filmed by the boys. The camera captured not just the crash, but the behavior inside the vehicle. The laughter, the encouragement, the presence of a firearm, and the total absence of remorse immediately afterward. The entire tragedy, from start to finish, was recorded by the offenders themselves. For Scott Habermel's family, answers had finally arrived, but the price was devastating. The revelation that children, some barely in middle school, could commit such a violent act was almost impossible to process. And as the legal system continues to move forward, one thing remains certain. This case will be remembered not only for the loss of an innocent man, but for exposing a shocking and troubling pattern of youth crime captured on social media. Evidence that ultimately solved a case that might otherwise have remained cold forever.